The solar storm warning cut through the silence of Henry Morrison's farmhouse like a sharp knife. Red lights flashed across his control panel, and the electronic beep echoed through the empty rooms. Henry sat in his chair, watching the numbers climb higher and higher on his screen. The radiation levels were dangerous. Very dangerous. Henry was alone on Kepler 442b, a planet far from Earth where humans had started a new colony many years ago. His parents had built this farm from nothing, working hard every single day to make it successful. Now it was his responsibility to keep it running. Most other colonists had already left for the main settlement called New Haven, where it was safer during storm season. But Henry preferred to stay here. He liked being alone with his work and his land. He stood up and walked to the window. The sky outside was already changing color. It looked wrong, like someone had painted it with colors that did not belong in nature. Purple streaks crossed the blue, and strange green lights danced at the horizon. The solar storm was coming faster than the meteorologists had predicted. Henry had maybe 2 hours to secure everything before it became too dangerous to go outside. He moved quickly through his farmhouse, checking doors and sealing windows with protective shutters. The reinforced walls would help keep the deadly radiation out. He had designed this shelter himself, learning from his parents and from years of experience on this harsh world. Every detail mattered. Every small mistake could mean death. That was when Henry heard it. A terrible sound filled the sky above his property. It started as a distant roar and grew louder and louder until it became almost unbearable. Henry rushed outside, shading his eyes against the strange purple light. Through the dust and chaos he saw it. A massive transport vessel was falling from the sky. Its engines were on fire, leaving long trails of orange and black smoke behind them. The ship was spinning slowly, completely out of control. Henry watched in horror as it fell toward the ground near his property. He could see the bottom of the ship now, covered in burn marks and damage. Something terrible had happened to it up there in space. The impact shook the earth beneath Henry's feet. A massive explosion erupted in the distance, sending a plume of dust and fire high into the air. The sound of the crash reached Henry's ears a moment later, rolling across the farmland like thunder. Birds that nested in his fields scattered into the purple sky, screaming with fear. Henry's hands shook as he reached for his communication device. Emergency protocols flooded his small screen with information. Other colonies were reporting the crash. A rescue team was being organized. But they were far away and Henry knew something important. If anyone had survived that crash, they needed help now. Not in an hour. Not in 30 minutes. No. He started to run toward the crash site, but then something made him stop. A new sound cut through the chaos of the storm. A smaller sound different from the crash. It was the sound of a pod being ejected from a dying ship. Henry looked up and saw it falling through the purple sky like a meteor. It was heading straight for his farm. The pod landed hard in the dust near his barn, sending rocks and dirt flying in all directions. The impact created a crater in the ground. For a moment nothing happened. Then steam began to hiss from the sides of the pod, and a loud mechanical sound filled the air. The door was opening. Henry held his breath. What emerged from that pod made him forget everything else. 13 figures stepped out into the deadly purple light. They were tall, much taller than Henry, and their bodies were covered in fur that shimmered like silver and gold in the strange storm light. Their faces were not human. They had wolf-like features with sharp teeth visible when they moved their mouths. Their eyes glowed bright amber like burning coals. Each one of them carried weapons that looked advanced and dangerous. They moved together with perfect coordination like soldiers trained to work as one unit. They were not human. These were the wolf hybrid hunters that Henry had heard stories about. The stellar corsairs. They were famous throughout the galaxy for their skill and their power. People said they could hunt anything and anyone. People said they never failed. But Henry had never expected to see them here on his small farm, stepping out of a crashed pod. The largest one stepped forward. She was different from the others. One side of her face was covered in long scars that ran from her forehead down to her neck. These scars told stories of battles and survival. She wore special armor that marked her as a commander, and when she looked at Henry, her amber eyes seemed to burn with intelligence and authority. "I am Commander Anna," she said, her voice deep and rough like gravel being crushed under heavy weight. "This farm is now secured as an emergency shelter. There will be no resistance." Henry raised his hands slowly, showing he had no weapons and meant no harm. His heart was beating very fast in his chest. He knew what these hunters were capable of. He had read the reports. They were dangerous. They were powerful. But right now they were also stranded. "Welcome to my home," Henry said, keeping his voice steady and calm. I want to help you. Can I do something for you? Silence, snapped another hunter, a female with pale fur and cold blue eyes that looked like ice. Her voice was sharp and cutting. We do not need human assistance. Humans are weak. Commander Anna turned her scarred face away from the pale-furred hunter and looked back at Henry. Her expression was difficult to read, but there was something in her eyes that suggested she might be different from the other hunters. She seemed to be thinking about something important. How long until your shelter is compromised by the radiation? Anna asked Henry directly. Henry looked at the sky, measuring the storm with the experience of someone who had lived through many dangerous seasons on this planet. My farmhouse is reinforced with special materials. We have maybe 18 hours before the radiation levels reach their peak. After that, it should start to clear up. Anna nodded once, a sharp movement. Then we stay here until the storm passes. This is not negotiable. We will use your shelter. Henry swallowed hard and nodded. He had just agreed to house 13 dangerous alien hunters during the most dangerous storm season of the year. He had no idea what would happen next. The power died at exactly midnight. Henry had known it was coming. The solar interference was too strong, too overwhelming for his backup systems to handle. But knowing something would happen and actually experiencing it were two very different things. When the lights went out, darkness fell across the farmhouse like a heavy blanket. Emergency lights kicked in with a dull red glow, casting everything in shades of crimson and shadow. The 13 hunters reacted immediately. Weapons appeared in their hands. Voices snarled commands in languages Henry did not understand. For a moment, the farmhouse filled with tension so thick that Henry could almost feel it pressing against his skin. The hunters were nervous. Predators trapped in darkness with an unfamiliar human. It was not a good combination. Commander Anna raised her hand, and the other hunters fell silent. She turned to Henry, her scarred face barely visible in the red emergency light. Explain, she commanded. Not a request. A demand. Henry took a careful breath. The solar radiation is interfering with the power grid. My backup generators are in the equipment room across the farm. They should restart automatically, but the interference is stopping them. I need to go manually restart them. Impossible, said the pale-furred hunter, the one named Vera. Her voice was sharp and certain. The radiation outside is lethal. Your body would burn before you reach the equipment room. The equipment room is shielded, Henry replied, speaking calmly even though his hands were trembling slightly. I designed the shielding myself. The radiation cannot penetrate it. I have done this before during other storms. Anna stepped closer to Henry. Her amber eyes studied him carefully, as if she was trying to see inside his mind. The other hunters watched. Everyone in the room held their breath, waiting to see what the commander would decide. You would go out into that storm to restore power for us? Anna asked. It was not really a question. There was something in her voice that suggested she was testing Henry, trying to understand his motivations. Yes, Henry said simply. We all die if the power stays off. The radiation will penetrate deeper into the house as time passes. The backup systems need to be running to keep us safe. And I designed these systems. I know them better than anyone. Anna nodded slowly. She turned to face the other hunters and pointed at a young one with copper-colored fur. Emma, she said. You go with him. You have 10 minutes. If you are not back by then, we seal the doors and assume you are both dead. Emma stepped forward immediately. She was younger than the other hunters, and something in her eyes suggested she was curious about humans. She grabbed a radiation suit from the emergency supplies Henry had stored, and she began to put it on with quick, efficient movements. Henry found his own suit and pulled it over his body. The material was thick and heavy, designed to reflect harmful radiation. They stepped outside into absolute chaos. The world was no longer purple and green. Now it was a violent mixture of colors that hurt to look at. The wind screamed around them like a living thing, trying to tear the protective suits right off their bodies. The radiation counter on Henry's wrist beeped frantically, clicking so fast it sounded almost like a machine gun. Emma's ears flattened against her head, pressing down as far as they could go. Her wolf instincts were screaming at her that this environment was wrong, that it was dangerous, that they should not be here. Stay close. Henry shouted over the sound of the wind. Emma nodded, though Henry could barely see her in the chaos. They moved across the farmland, step by difficult step. The equipment room was only a short distance away, but it felt like miles. The radiation seemed to push against Henry's suit, trying to find a way through. His counter continued its desperate clicking. Emma moved with the grace of a trained hunter, but even her athletic body struggled against the powerful wind and the strange, violent sky. Finally, they reached the equipment room. Henry's hands shook as he input the security code. The door hissed open and they stumbled inside. The shielded interior was calm and quiet, a complete contrast to the chaos outside. Henry could hear Emma breathing heavily beside him. "Your species is not as fragile as we believed," Emma said quietly, looking at Henry with new respect in her glowing eyes. Henry did not answer. He could not afford to waste time talking. He moved to the generator panel with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. His hands knew exactly what to do. Unlock the safety panel. Bypass the automatic system. Reroute the power through the agricultural equipment circuits. Activate the manual override. Each movement was precise and practiced. The generators hummed to life. Lights flickered on in the distance. The emergency systems began to function again. Henry wiped sweat from his forehead and turned to Emma. "Let's go back." The journey back was slightly easier, now that Henry knew the way and the generators were providing some protection to the power systems. They reached the farmhouse and removed their suits quickly. Their bodies were shaking from cold and exhaustion and fear. Commander Anna was waiting for them when they entered. She looked at Henry carefully, watching as he stripped off the contaminated suit. Something flickered across her scarred face, something that might have been respect or might have been surprise. "You risked your life for ours," Anna said. It was an observation, not a question. "I risked it for all of us," Henry replied, breathing heavily. "We all would have died without power." Later that evening, Henry prepared food for everyone. He worked in his small kitchen, preparing dried meat, vegetables from his hydroponic gardens, and water purified by his systems. The hunters watched him work, curious about this human and his strange customs. They ate in silence, but Henry noticed they ate every bit of the food he had prepared. No one complained. No one wasted anything. After dinner, a hunter named Lisa approached Henry. She had soft features and auburn-colored fur. "Why do you stay here alone?" she asked. Her voice was gentler than the other hunters' voices. Henry looked out through the window at his fields, barely visible in the red emergency light. "My parents built this farm from nothing. They worked every single day to make it successful. When they passed away, someone had to keep it going. That someone is me." Anna heard this conversation from across the room. Something changed in her expression. The scarred commander stared at Henry for a long moment, and in that moment, something shifted between them. It was the beginning of understanding. The second day of the storm brought a new and dangerous problem. Henry was checking the readings on his monitoring system when he noticed something wrong. The numbers were not what they should be. He frowned and checked them again, then a third time. His heart began to beat faster in his chest. "The water purification system is damaged," Henry announced to the group of hunters who were gathered in the main room of the farmhouse. His voice was calm, but everyone could hear the concern underneath it. "Without it, we will have contaminated water by tonight. The radiation will seep into our water supply and we cannot drink it." Commander Anna stood up immediately. Her scarred face showed no emotion, but her amber eyes were sharp and focused. "Can it be repaired?" she asked. "Yes," Henry said. "But it requires someone to go outside again. The repair station is close to the farmhouse, but it is still exposed to the radiation." "Then we go," Anna said simply. She looked around at the other hunters. "Emma, Lisa, Rachel. Suit up. We go now." Rachel was a fierce-looking hunter with dark fur and scars on her arms that spoke of countless battles. Emma was the younger one who had helped Henry before. Lisa was the gentle one who had asked about his family. All three of them moved without hesitation, pulling on the radiation suits with practiced efficiency. Henry checked his own suit one more time, making sure every seal was tight and secure. He could feel the tension in the room. The other hunters watched them prepare, their weapons close at hand, ready for anything that might go wrong. This time, stepping into the purple chaos of the storm felt slightly less terrifying to Henry. He had done it once before. He knew what to expect. But Emma, Lisa, and Rachel experienced it as if for the first time. The wind knocked them backwards. The radiation burned against their suits. The colors in the sky were so strange and violent that they hurt to look at. Henry led them to the purification station, moving quickly but carefully. The station was a complicated maze of pipes, filters, mechanical parts, and manual override systems. It was a marvel of human engineering, designed and built by Henry's own hands. Every component served a purpose. Every part was connected to every other part in a system that had to work perfectly or not at all. "Why do humans design things so complicated?" Rachel demanded, her voice filled with frustration as she looked at the tangle of equipment in front of her. "Everything should be simple. Everything should be easy." Because we have to, Henry replied, moving carefully around the station. His hands began to work automatically, checking connections and testing systems. We do not have artificial intelligence to manage everything for us. We do not have advanced computers that can handle thousands of calculations every second. We have to understand our tools completely. We have to know how they work because our lives depend on it. He began to explain each part as he worked. He showed them how the filters caught the radiation particles. He demonstrated how the pipes carried the clean water through the system. He pointed out the manual overrides that allowed a human to control the process without any computer assistance. His voice was patient and clear, like a teacher explaining something important to students. Anna watched Henry work with intense focus. She saw something in the way he moved and thought that went beyond simple mechanical skill. Henry understood these systems at a deeper level. He understood the purpose behind every design choice. He moved with confidence and purpose, never wasting emotion. When something did not work, he did not panic. He simply thought about the problem and tried a different approach. Humans survive because you have to think, Anna said quietly, watching Henry work. Your species cannot rely on strength or speed or instinct. You have to understand everything. Henry did not answer. He was concentrating on a particularly difficult valve that refused to turn. But Anna's words stayed with him. She was right. Humans had learned to survive through intelligence and adaptation, not through physical power. By the time they finished the repairs, the radiation levels outside had increased. The return journey to the farmhouse was difficult and dangerous. Several times the wind knocked them backwards or nearly tore their suits. But they made it back safely, and within minutes of arriving, the water purification system came back online. Clean, safe water flowed through the pipes once again. That evening, as they sat together in the farmhouse, the atmosphere had changed. The hunters seemed less suspicious of Henry now. They had worked together. They had survived a dangerous situation. Something had shifted between them. Lisa was the first to start talking about her experiences. She described a bounty she had captured on a distant planet, a criminal who had hidden in a city of steel towers. Rachel followed with a story about combat training, about battles she had fought and enemies she had defeated. Emma asked Henry questions about Earth, the planet where humanity had first evolved. What was it like? Emma asked, her copper-colored fur glowing in the light of the farmhouse. Was it safe? Was it easy to survive there? Henry thought about this for a moment. No, he said finally. Earth was not easy. We were weak there too. We had no claws like you. No speed. No strength. The animals that lived there were stronger and faster and more dangerous. But we did not have to fight them with our bodies. We invented tools. We learned to make weapons from stone and metal. We built shelters. We learned to work together in groups. That is how we survived. Not through strength, but through thinking and cooperation. Anna leaned back in her chair, listening to Henry speak. Her scarred face was thoughtful. Your species should not exist, she said slowly. By all logical measures, humans should have been eliminated millions of years ago. You are too weak. You are too slow. You are too fragile. Yet here you are, surviving on a hostile planet, alone with 13 alien hunters facing a deadly solar storm. Somehow you continue to exist. Somehow you continue to survive. Humans refuse to accept impossible, Henry said simply. That is our greatest strength. We refuse to give up. We refuse to accept defeat. Even when everything tells us we should fail, we find a way to succeed. Rachel nodded slowly. For the first time, there was something that looked like respect in her scarred, fierce face. The third day of the storm arrived with a strange silence. The purple and green colors had faded slightly from the sky. The wind was not as violent as it had been. Everyone in the farmhouse could feel that the worst of the solar storm was passing. But before anyone could feel relieved, Henry's communication device began to crackle with static. He was sitting alone in the control room when the signal came through. At first, it was just noise and interference like so much of the background radiation during the storm. But then a voice broke through the static. It was weak and faint, almost impossible to hear, but it was definitely a human voice. And it was calling for help. Henry's body went completely still. He increased the volume on his receiver and leaned forward, straining to understand the words coming through the terrible interference. Anyone receiving this? This is Settlement North requesting emergency assistance. We have experienced a massive avalanche triggered by the solar flare activity. Approximately 200 colonists are trapped in the main dome structure. We have limited supplies and the situation is critical. Is anyone receiving this message? The voice cut out. Static took its place again. Henry tried to respond, but his transmission was too weak. The radiation was still interfering with long-distance communication. But he had heard enough. The northern settlement, 200 kilometers away, was in serious danger. 200 people. Men, women, and children. All trapped. All waiting for help. Henry sat back in his chair, his mind racing. He should contact the main settlement and let them know about the situation. They would send a rescue team. But how long would it take? 200 kilometers across dangerous terrain during a solar storm. It could take days. And the trapped colonists might not have days. Henry stood up and walked to the main room where the hunters were resting. Commander Anna was standing by the window watching the sky. Her scarred face was calm, but her amber eyes missed nothing. She turned to face Henry immediately as if she had been expecting him. "The northern settlement is in trouble," Henry said. "An avalanche. 200 colonists trapped. I received a distress signal." Anna did not hesitate. She did not ask questions. "We leave immediately," she commanded. "Emma, Lisa, Rachel, Vera. Gather your weapons. We move now." Henry stared at her in shock. "Why?" he asked. "There is no bounty. These are just colonists, regular people. There is no reward for helping them. No profit. Why would you help?" Anna turned away from the window and looked at Henry directly. Her scarred face was serious and determined. "We came to this planet hunting a rogue artificial intelligence that your species created. An AI that has caused destruction and death across multiple colonies. We came to hunt a criminal made by humans. But here is what I have learned in these 3 days with you. Yes, humans create problems. Yes, humans make mistakes. Humans create dangerous things like rogue AIs. But humans also create solutions. Humans create knowledge and ingenuity and the ability to survive impossible situations. That is what you are, Henry Morrison. You are a solution. Your entire species is a solution to impossible problems. And today we choose to fight with you instead of against you." Henry felt something warm grow in his chest. He nodded, unable to speak. Within 30 minutes, Henry and 5 of the hunters were loaded into an armored transport vehicle that had been stored in Henry's barn. It was designed for traveling across dangerous terrain during harsh weather. The hunters brought their weapons and their training. Henry brought his knowledge of the local landscape and the routes that would get them to the settlement fastest. The journey was brutal. The avalanche had blocked the main roads, forcing them to navigate through rocky passes and narrow valleys. Several times, Henry had to guide them around obstacles that would have stopped a normal vehicle. The hunters took turns driving, their strength and reactions faster than any humans could be. The wind still howled around them. The radiation levels had decreased but were still dangerous. The landscape outside was harsh and unforgiving. But they pushed forward, driven by the knowledge that 200 people were waiting for them. It took 6 hours to reach the northern settlement. When they arrived, the situation was even worse than Henry had imagined. The dome structure was partially collapsed. Debris covered the entrances. And everywhere, Henry could see the signs of panic and fear in the faces of the colonists who had managed to escape the main dome. A man in a colonial administrator's uniform approached them. His face was covered in dust and blood. "Thank the stars you came," he said desperately. "We thought we were going to die here. The rescue team from New Haven is still hours away." Anna stepped forward, her scarred face showing no emotion. "How many people are trapped?" she demanded. 237, the administrator said. "Mostly in the main dome. Some in the connected structures. We do not have the equipment to move the avalanche debris. We do not have the strength." Anna looked at her hunters. Then she looked at Henry. "We have the strength," she said simply. "And we have him. We have someone who understands how to problem solve." What happened next was extraordinary. The hunters used their powerful bodies to move heavy debris. They worked with precision and intelligence, not just brute force. Henry analyzed the collapsed dome structure, identifying which pieces could be moved and which ones were holding up other pieces. He directed the hunters on where to push, where to pull, how to carefully extract trapped people without causing more damage. Colonists emerged from the rubble one by one. Families reunited. Children were pulled to safety. The hunters worked without complaint, without showing any sign of fatigue. They moved rocks that weighed hundreds of kilograms. They held up collapsing sections of the dome while Henry guided other colonists through the gaps. By midnight, all 237 colonists were safe. Henry stood beside Anna, both of them covered in dust and exhaustion. Around them, colonists embraced each other. Families held their children. Medical teams tended to injuries. Rescue workers organized shelters and supplies. "They survive," Anna said quietly, watching the colonists. "Despite everything, they survive. They help each other. They refused to give up. Yes, Henry said simply. That is what humans do. Anna turned to look at him. In that moment, something fundamental had changed in how she viewed humanity. She had come as a hunter seeking a criminal. She was leaving as something different. She was leaving as a believer in the incredible power of human determination and cooperation. 4 days had passed since the rescue at the northern settlement. The solar storm had completely cleared, leaving behind a sky that was once again blue and clear and beautiful. The radiation levels had dropped to safe levels. The emergency was over. Henry stood in his farmyard, watching as the hunters prepared their transport vessel for departure. It had taken 3 days to repair the damaged ship that had crashed near his property. Emma and 2 other hunters had worked alongside Henry to fix the engine systems. Now the vessel was ready to fly. Ready to leave. Commander Anna approached Henry slowly. Her scarred face was calm, but there was something in her amber eyes that suggested she was thinking about many things at once. She carried a data pad in her hand and she held it out for Henry to see. I have completed the official report, Anna said. Her voice was formal and official, like she was speaking to someone very important. I am sending it to the Galactic Council today. Before we leave, you should know what it says. Henry took the data pad and began to read. Anna's words were clear and direct. She described the crash landing on his property. She described how Henry had risked his life to save them. She described the repairs and the cooperation. She described the rescue mission at the northern settlement. But most importantly, she described her conclusions about humanity. Henry read, "The species known as humanity is not the weakest species in the galaxy. Current analysis suggests the opposite. Humans excel at the skill that matters most above all others. Humans survive through adaptation and innovation. When faced with impossible situations, they do not accept defeat. They find solutions. They inspire others to find solutions. Humans are not strong in the traditional sense. They are not fast. They do not have natural weapons. But humans transform their limitations into advantages. They refuse to accept that something cannot be done. The human ability to persist, to innovate, to cooperate with others, and to find solutions to impossible problems makes them far more valuable than any amount of physical strength. Underestimating humanity would be a strategic error of the highest magnitude. Recommendation: the Galactic Council should reconsider humanity's place in the galaxy and their potential as allies rather than as a species to be ignored or underestimated." Henry looked up from the data pad. His eyes were wet with tears. "You did not have to write this," he said. "Yes, I did," Anna replied. "It is the truth, and the truth must be recorded. We came here to hunt a criminal made by your species. We found something far more valuable. We found a species that refuses to be broken by circumstances or limitations." Emma stepped forward. The young hunter with copper-colored fur had changed over these past days. She looked at Henry with genuine friendship in her eyes. "You taught us something important," she said. "You taught us that strength is not everything. You taught us that thinking and working together matters more than power alone." Lisa and Rachel approached as well. Lisa was the gentle one. Rachel was the fierce warrior. Both of them carried respect for Henry in their expressions. "Will you remember us?" Lisa asked. "When you continue your life here on this farm?" "Every single day," Henry said simply. "You came as hunters. You became my friends." Anna extended her hand to Henry, the traditional human gesture of respect and farewell. Henry gripped it firmly. Her grip was strong but not threatening. It was the grip of one warrior to another. "The rogue artificial intelligence that we were sent to capture still exists somewhere in the galaxy," Anna said. "But now I understand something I did not understand before. Your species created that AI because you were trying to solve a problem. You were trying to improve your situation. That is what humans do. You create and sometimes your creations go wrong. But you also have the ability to fix what you broke. Do not lose that ability. Do not stop innovating and trying and refusing to accept defeat." "I will not," Henry promised. The transport vessel was ready. The hunters began boarding one by one. Emma was the last to leave. She looked back at Henry one final time, her ears perked forward in a gesture of respect. "You are not weak, Henry Morrison," she said. "Your species is not weak. You are the strongest species I have ever encountered, and I have fought against creatures from 100 different worlds." Then she was gone, disappearing into the vessel. The door sealed behind her. Henry stepped back as the engines roared to life. The vessel lifted off the ground slowly at first, then with increasing speed. Higher and higher it climbed into the blue sky. Henry watched until the vessel disappeared among the stars. He stood alone in his farmyard, surrounded by his fields and his equipment and his home. Everything looked the same as it had before the hunters arrived. But nothing was actually the same. Something fundamental had changed. Henry walked slowly back to his farmhouse and sat down at his control panel. He began to work, recording his own detailed account of the past 4 days. He described the hunters. He described their abilities and their intelligence. But most importantly, he recorded what he had learned. Humanity was not the weakest species in the galaxy. Humanity had always survived by being clever and adaptable. Every limitation that humans faced had forced them to innovate and create and think in new ways. Every obstacle had made them stronger. The galaxy did not know this yet. But soon, through Anna's report to the Galactic Council, they would begin to understand. Henry looked out his window at his farm. His parents had built this place from nothing. They had faced impossible challenges on this harsh world and refused to give up. They had taught Henry to do the same. And now Henry had proven something important. He had proven that a single human, facing impossible odds, could inspire even the strongest warriors to believe in the power of persistence and innovation. Days turned into weeks. Henry continued his farm work, caring for his crops and maintaining his systems. But he was no longer truly alone. Messages began to arrive from the Galactic Council. Other colonies requested his advice on agricultural systems and survival strategies. Scientists wanted to study his innovations. And slowly, humanity's reputation in the galaxy began to change. But Henry never forgot the real lesson. It was not about being famous or being recognized. It was about refusing to accept defeat. It was about looking at a problem and finding a solution. It was about working together with others toward a common goal. It was about the simple human truth that impossibility is just another challenge waiting to be solved. Anna, in her vessel traveling through space, sometimes thought about that small farm on Kepler 442b. When she faced difficult situations, she remembered Henry's calm determination. She remembered the way he had worked through problems without panic or fear. She remembered what it felt like to witness true human strength, not the strength of muscles or weapons, but the strength of the human spirit refusing to accept that anything was impossible. Humanity's future in the galaxy would be different from this day forward.